everyone, welcome to another video. Now I'm going to show you today how to use the Coffee Talk stamp set from Joy Clair Stamps. I made this card for the Coffee Lovers blog hop, but I wanted to show you how exactly I made it and the great way to use this new stamp set from Joy Clair. Now this is called Coffee Talk. It's got this great cup that you see in the bottom right hand corner, but then you see all these little circles. Those actually fit inside the cup. Also, all of the little circle sentiments fit inside too. So you can layer, you can use one, you can use the other. Then you've got all these great sentiments down in the bottom left hand corner. So I'm going to kind of break this down for you, show you how I made my card today, and show you how you can use this stamp set. Here is a closer look at the stamp set itself, just so you get a nice black and white image of what it actually stamps like once you stamp it out. Now I'm going to go ahead and start off my card by doing some stamping. Now most of the time when I would be doing stamping and I'm using alcohol markers to color, which I will be, I would use Memento Tuxedo black ink. But I want to make this a little bit lighter, a little bit more springish, so I'm actually going to use Memento gray flannel ink. Now all Memento inks pretty much work with the Memento dewdrops, I guess I should say, they're dye inks. They work with alcohol markers, all the ones I have found. So I'm going to be using the Memento gray flannel to do my stamping. I am also stamping on a piece of fun foam. It's very thick. I get mine from Hallmark Scrapbooks and Crafts, and they've got their really thick fun foam. So I will leave a link to that down in the description box below. This is what I use to stamp larger stamps on to get a good impression. And I've got a piece of computer paper over it just so it catches all that stray ink that's going to go off the edge and I don't have to replace my fun foam every time. I am stamping this cup several times, turning it this way and that so it doesn't look exactly the same. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp all around that first coffee cup. I wanted that first coffee cup to be full and on the paper because that's the one that's going to hold my sentiment. Now there aren't going to be really any more full coffee cups on this paper, and that's okay. That was the look I was going for, more of a pattern paper look, which if you watch my videos you know I like to make my own pattern paper, so that's pretty much what I'm doing here. I'm going to stamp one more time. It's just going to be a very small portion right at the top where it's got a little bit of that white space just to fill that in, and that's going to be the stamping for the cups. Now once that was done, it was time to move on to some coloring. I'm using my Dick Blick Studio brush markers. I will have all of the colors I'm using down in the bottom left hand corner. So if you have these markers or if you want to find something different, you can go have a look at those colors and then choose from your own marker collection something that might match it. Now I am starting off with this light peach color, and this is going to be only two colors. So I'm actually going to do some tip to tip blending on this, which is something that adds that third color into it. So if you don't have that many markers, this is a great way to get kind of that third color that you might need. So I'm doing that tip to tip blending now. I just kind of put the tip of my lightest marker underneath the darkest. You want the darkest to kind of flow into the lightest one, and then it just blends out. It doesn't ruin your tips at all. It's very easy to do. Then when I get that middle color in there, I come in with my lightest color and blend everything out together, and it's really that simple. Now I'm doing very springish colors, so I started off with peach. I'm going to be doing some yellow. Now for the yellow, I actually have 3 different yellows, so no tip to tip blending with this one. I'm starting off with my lightest, then I go to my darkest. I go in where the shading kind of already is on this stamp set. That's one nice thing about it. It has that shading already in there, so you know exactly where you need to put your darkest color. Then I came in with my medium color. I'm going to give that a little bit of time to dry, and then I'll come in with my lightest color. Sometimes whenever you get way too much saturation, it can start to bleed. So if you just give it a little bit of time to dry, you can avoid that bleeding. Now again, I'm coming back over to peach in this other cup. I'm doing 2 colors or 2 cups of the same color, and then I'll finish blending out on that one. Now for my final colors, I'm going to be doing some purple. So I'm starting off with a very light lilac color, and I'm going to do the bottom left hand and the top right. I'm kind of spreading these out a little bit so you don't have 2 of the same color right next to each other. Now I only have two of these markers too, and they are pretty far apart on the spectrum. So I'm going to go in very, very lightly with this very dark violet color and just putting it in where the darkest colors would be. You can see I'm using a very light hand, not putting much of this down at all. Then I'll come in with some of that tip to tip and blend out that darkest color and then blend out completely. This is one of those ones that kind of bleeds on me like crazy, so I have to be extra careful when I go in and saturate this paper. So I'll blend it out once, let it dry. If it's not completely blended how I want to, I'll come back in with my lightest color and continue blending until I get it how I want it. And you can let this dry and then come back in again. It really is up to you how much you want this blended out. Now I'm going to finish up this final cup here. And then with each one of my spoons, I'm actually going to come in with some silver or some gray. Essentially, I'm just using one color, very quick coloring here, and just coloring in the entire spoon. As for the cups, I'm going to leave them white to kind of let them shine against this coffee that I'm going to be stamping. I am using my Misty, and I've got my creative corners in there because I've got so much stamping that's going to be off the edge. This just helps me not have to kind of put my stamp out in the middle and then try and line it up each time. This is just a lifesaver. Now each one of these little circles is going to put an image inside your coffee cup. You're just going to look straight over. That's why I've cut that out so you don't see the back of my head each time. But just look straight over, line it up with your coffee cup, and then you need to stamp it down. You can do this without your Misty or any stamp positioner. You can just use an acrylic block and look straight over. It's really simple and easy to line these up. It's just a circle. But for my stamping, to make it look a little bit more creamy, a little bit more realistic, and add some texture to this, I'm using a chalk ink. This is again from Memento. It is a chalk ink in the shade of gingerbread. It's a very creamy color and it sits on top of the paper. It doesn't soak in, so you don't lose that texture. But it also has a chalky finish to it kind of, so it still has that texture, that creaminess, that richness. It's just gorgeous. It really works out well for this. I'll leave a link to this down in the description box as well. Now, as you've seen in that stamp set, there are a lot of options. I couldn't choose just one. So on that first one, I did solid because I'm going to stamp in a sentiment in just a moment on that one. For the rest of these cups, I'm actually going to go ahead and put in one of the more designs, I guess you could say. Sometimes you see that latte art or whatever. That's what these are. So my next one, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Look straight through, lined it up, picked it up with the lid of my Misty, inked it up, and stamped it down. And there you have that beautiful, gorgeous, realistic looking art in your cup then. My next one, I did the same exact thing. Lined it up, looked straight through. It helps if you look straight over the top. That's why I'm cutting this out, because if I'm looking straight over it, so all you can see literally is the back of my head as I look straight through that stamp, and just line it up and then stamp it down. It's that simple. Now you can give these some pressure too. If you don't have a Misty, just give it some nice good pressure with your hand as you stamp it down. There's a closer look at that stamp down. You can see the texture and the creaminess you get with that chalk ink. Now I'm going to do the top right, or the bottom left hand corner. Sorry, I just have it flipped around right now. I'll go ahead and ink this up as well and stamp it down. Now this is the last one that I'm actually going to do any of the art in, because it's the only one you're going to be able to, or the last one you're going to be able to see exactly what I'm stamping. The other two that I have left to stamp, they have such a little amount on the paper. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that solid one in each one of those. But I am using my Misty, and it's just going to be super simple and easy to stamp these down. You don't even need to ink up the whole thing. Now once I get this last one stamped, then it's time to move on to the sentiment. I'm going to give you a last close-up look at this panel though, all stamped. Now you could leave this like this, add a little banner if you wanted to, and this would be gorgeous on a card. But I want to add my sentiment right in that coffee cup. You've got all these great little sayings. You've got coffee break, stay strong, love, tall, dark, and rich. I'm going to be using the Miss You. and I will stamp that right in the coffee cup that I stamped very first. That's the whole coffee cup. I'm looking straight through to line it up, and it's the solid one. Now you could do this over one of the designs. It just wouldn't show up that well, so that's why I like to use the solid one. Now the thing about chalk ink is it does stay wet. You can heat emboss with it, so I am going to liberally put on some embossing, or some of my embossing bag powder on that, and I will be stamping this down in some Versamark ink. Now, because the rest of the designs are in white, I thought I would go ahead and stamp this down in the Versamark ink and then heat emboss with white embossing powder to kind of go along with the rest of the designs on the coffee cups. But you could use any sort of embossing powder you wanted to. Gold, silver, a really fun color. But once you sprinkle this on, more than likely, if you used a chalk ink, you're going to have a little bit of sticking where you don't want it. So I just use a dry watercolor brush with a very fine point on it and just brush away any that's where I don't want it to be. That way I don't have spots of white here and there. Once that was done though, I went ahead and used my heat embossing tool to go ahead and heat set that. I did do a double stamping on this just because it just helps it pop away from that background more and gives it a little bit of a fuller look. So I kept that creative corners right there, went ahead and kept my stamp on, put my panel right back in where it was beforehand, and then I inked up that stamp again, and I'll stamp it right down exactly where it was. You can do this with an acrylic block as well. You just need to look straight through like you look straight through whenever you stamp down those circles. But once I had that second stamp on, again, I just went in with another layer embossing powder right over the top. And once that's heat set, you can really see the difference between doing it once and doing it twice. It just looks a lot more full. There you can see the difference that that second embossing really makes. And there's a closer photo as well. You can see there are a few stray powders, but because I use that chalk ink and it has a little bit of texture already, you can hardly notice them unless you look really close. Now for the border of this card, I'm actually using a Neat and Tangled die set. It's called Tiny Cuts. It's got all these great little dies in it that just cut a little pattern across, or a little border across your card. I'm using the hearts, and I went ahead and cut that into a strip of purple cardstock. Now behind that purple cardstock, I'll go ahead and put a piece of yellow cardstock, and that is going to add a yellow color to my hearts without having to do a lot of extra work. Now I kept this pretty thick because I wasn't sure how much I wanted this border to show, so I kept it really thick. And I also kept a little strip of white just on, or a little strip of yellow just on the edge there as well, to kind of play into that pink and yellow and purple sort of color combination I had going on. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that border to the left side of that panel that I made, and that panel does measure the entire area of an A2 card base. So it's 4¼ by 5½. So that that strip that I cut with the hearts in it is also 5½ inches long. Adding this strip is going to make it a little bit wider than 4¼ but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and load this onto the card base, and then I'll trim it down as need be. That way I get a perfect sort of match, and I'm not having to figure it all out exactly how big and everything it needs to be, in case my card panel is a little bit wider or my card base is a little bit wider. I went ahead and added double-sided adhesive onto the back of that, and then I just popped that onto an A2 top folding card base, and then I'll use some scissors just to trim that up. Now I had adhesive on this. You might not want to put it all the way across because it sticks like crazy. But once I had that all trimmed up, it was time to decorate the inside of the card. Again, I'm using the creative corners on my Misty to make sure that that sentiment is nice and straight. And this is from the same Coffee Talk stamp set that I've been using across the whole card. I've loaded that into my Misty. Use that little creative corners piece to make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'll use some Memento gray flannel ink that I used before. This is just a way to bring the outside of the card the inside using the same colors and whatnot. I'll stamp down that Let's Get Together sentiment, and then I'm also going to stamp a cup right underneath that. Now I just had a little bit hanging off the side, and then on the inside of that cup I'll go ahead and add the final little art that I hadn't added on any of the other cups on the outside. I'm going to be using that same chalk ink that I've been using across the entire card, the Versamagic gingerbread ink. I'll go ahead and line that up, pick it up with my Misty lid, ink it up with that ink, and then stamp it down. Now I am not going to add any color to this cup just because it is inside of the card. I don't want to have it go to the back of the card. You could always add this as an inside panel and then you could color it in, but I just kept it nice and simple. Now here is a final look at the inside of the card all put together, and also a few final looks at the outside of the card as well. This really was a fun card to make, and this stamp set is amazing. There's so many different things you could do with it, but I hope you guys enjoyed a look at how you can use this stamp set. And that is going to do it for me today. There are a few links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.